Let me say I'm pleased to work on this with Senator Donnelly. This is an amendment that, as he said, requires that we categorize fuel types, that we say what works for various types of fuel, as opposed to set some standard that makes it impossible for other resources we have not to be used. It says that the technology has to be commercially available. We had the acting EPA director before the Appropriations Committee earlier this year, and I just asked the acting director, is this, the rule that you're talking about, is this technology available? Can somebody go out and buy this? And the response was something like, well, the parts of it are out there, but nobody's ever quite put it together yet, which of course meant that the rule for the first time ever set a standard that couldn't possibly be reached. And in states like our states, in states like Missouri and Indiana, where I'm from and where Senator Donnelly's from, we're 80%, more than 80% dependent on coal. Some of our constituents are 100% dependent on coal. And if you do things that raise those utility bills, they know it and their families know it and their community knows it. This amendment simply would force the EPA to use common sense when setting standards for any facility. The new source performance standards based upon emission limits for power plants, for refineries, for manufacturing facilities, for whatever else they can cover, just simply don't meet that common sense standard. In fact, last March, when the proposed rule went out, there were more than 2 million comments. Now, you've got to work pretty hard to find this rule, and you've got to really be dedicated to read it. And 2 million comments that said this won't work. It is so obvious it won't work. The rule said that if someone wants to build a coal plant, they have to install carbon capture technology, which according to the rule, would add 80% to the cost of electricity. 80% to the cost of electricity. Now, it would overstate it a little bit initially, but not very far in the future. If you just got your utility bill and multiplied it by 2, you're pretty close to what your utility bill would be if the proponents of this rule believe, really, if what they say will happen is what would happen. Now, what happens if you double the utility bill? How many jobs go away? How many families find themselves in stress? When cap and trade failed, the president, who'd said earlier that under his cap and trade plan, electric rates would necessarily skyrocket. When it failed, the president said, well, that was only one way of skinning the cat. Obviously, the EPA is looking for the second way to skin this cat and to impact families. It would make it expensive to do what can be otherwise done in the countries. Businesses and households would need to make a decision about that. You know, what we need to be doing is look for using all of our resources in the best possible way. More American energy is a critical thing, and we ought to be doing everything we can to see how we produce more American energy, a more certain supply, easier to transition from one fuel to another, not harder, not putting one electric plant out of business and requiring that you build an entire new electric plant. You know how you pay for an electric plant is somebody gives you the authority to pass all that cost along to the people who are served by it. There's no free electricity out there, and it makes a real difference. When families look at this, you know, the most vulnerable families among us are the ones that are most impacted by the higher utility bill. The Bureau of Labor Statistics said that nearly 40 million American households earn less than $30,000 a year, and in those households, they spend almost 20% of their income on energy. Well, you want to make that 30% or 40%? Surely that is not the answer for vulnerable families. The EPA, if you read press reports today, will come out with a rule tomorrow. I hope that this amendment would become part of the law that would make that rule, frankly, Madam President, make common sense. The The American people want the administration to stop picking winners and losers through the regulatory policies. If the Congress wants to have that debate and change the law and do that in the open, that's one way to do it. But I think we all know that American consumers have figured out where this road takes their family, and they don't want to go there. So I urge support of the amendment that Senator Donnelly and I are working on. Common sense and real cost-benefit analysis. New standards that work are essential, not new standards that you know won't work. I'm glad to be a co-sponsor of this amendment and urge my colleagues to join Senator Donnelly and I if we get a chance to vote on it as part of this bill. And I would notice the absence of a quorum.